Over the past year, there has been a noticeable shift in the views of many individuals who once firmly identified with Donald Trump. These were people who were deeply invested in his rhetoric, promises, and the political ideology he espoused. But now, as time has passed, many of these former Trump supporters are beginning to question their choices. What's even more fascinating is that this change in perspective isn't happening quietly. It's unfolding right before our eyes, in full view of the public. It's almost as if a collective awakening is occurring, where people are realizing that the unwavering loyalty they once held may have been misplaced. This shift is particularly evident in the manosphere, a space online that celebrates hypermasculine culture, a place where opinions are often blunt and unyielding. Now let me clarify something. I'm a man with a podcast myself, but I want to be clear. Just because I'm a guy with a podcast does mean I automatically fit into this so-called, bro-heavy, world of podcasting that became such a loud force for Trump during the 2024 election cycle. It seems that many of these men, fired up by their own brand of hypermasculinity, jumped on the Trump bandwagon. I imagine they were fueled by their gym routines and a constant intake of protein shakes, or, as they humorously call it, fresh pow-pow. I have to admit, it sounds both ridiculous and strangely fitting. It's a joke in their world, but it also points to something much larger, a phenomenon of people who were willing to buy into Trump's promises without fully considering what the long-term implications of their support would be. Now, more than a year into Trump's second term, those same individuals who once couldn't get enough of their protein shakes have made the switch to coffee. They're waking up, both figuratively and literally, to the reality of the situation. The truth is hitting them hard. They might have been wrong. They may have supported a candidate who, in hindsight, hasn't delivered on the promises that initially convinced them to back him. And now, they're speaking up and admitting their mistakes, no shame in it. This is the quintessential FAFO moment, F around, find out. And this is something we need to talk about, highlight, and reflect on carefully. Before we get deeper into this, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to Really American Media here on YouTube, and also make sure to check us out on Substack. While I'm at it, I want to take a moment to express my admiration for Nicole Wallace. I can't help it, I have a bit of a crush. Hi Nicole, what's up? She's been incredibly vocal on this issue, and I'm sure she's ready to jog our memories on a few things. Now let's revisit someone many of us might have forgotten, Theo Vaughn. He's a comedian and podcaster who was once a vocal supporter of Trump. He even interviewed Trump before the election and attended his inauguration. Fast forward to September and Theo took a significant turn. He asked the Department of Homeland Security to take down a video that showed immigration authorities making an arrest. A video that, somewhat ironically, included a clip of Theo himself, taken without his permission. This marked a major shift, as it demonstrated Theo's growing distance from the very political world he had once embraced so wholeheartedly. And Theo isn't the only one. Many so-called manosphere figures, once diehard Trump supporters, are now questioning their loyalty to him. It's fascinating to watch how quickly things can change in the realm of politics, and it speaks to the idea that public opinion is far from static. These transformations are significant because they show just how much influence one person can have on an entire movement, and just how quickly that influence can slip away. You can see it all falling apart now. The nail polish is literally coming off. Al's got, 3 more weeks of nail polish left before he has to go back to the drawing board. This is what we've come to Trump-s America, where promises have crumbled and the things that were once touted as essential now seem utterly irrelevant. Nail polish, really? The things they said were important to the foundation of this movement, the things that were meant to embody strength and authenticity, are now stripped away to reveal how hollow it all was. What was once a rallying cry for people looking for change now feels like a farce. The policies, the rhetoric, the grand promises, all of it seemed so sure and bold at the time. But now, it feels like the truth is finally emerging, and it's nothing like the promises they sold us. I've been getting messages from people sliding into my DMs, calling me out, pointing fingers, saying things like, "Hey, you see what your boy S doing? You voted for this, you were part of this." And to them I say, no, I didn't vote for this, not any of this. He's doing the exact opposite of everything I voted for. I voted for him to end T. He wars, instead he's funding them, deepening our involvement, expanding military engagements. I voted for him to cut government spending, to shrink the budget and stop the wasteful spending that's been plaguing our country for years. But what did he do? He's increasing it. He's making the very things I wanted to see stop even worse. It's as though every ideal, every promise he made during his campaign has been systematically undone. Every expectation we had has been betrayed. And as hard as it is to admit, it's almost as if nothing that we hoped for, nothing that we fought for, has come to pass. Instead, we're left with a reality that feels like a constant betrayal. Take immigration, for example. Trump promised he would be tough on it. He promised to send people back, to close the borders and take drastic action. And what did we get? A complete flip-flop. One minute he's promising to remove immigrants, the next minute he's walking back those promises. Now some might see that as a good thing, but it only exposes how much inconsistency exists at the core of his presidency. It shows a lack of understanding of what people actually need, a lack of commitment to his own promises. It's not just about policy changes, it's about the integrity of his leadership. It's about the trust he's broken with the very people who thought he would fix this problem. The contradictions are glaring. And let's talk about something that's impossible to ignore: the way Trump himself has handled the passage of time. I've seen presidents age over the years, some visibly worn by the weight of their decisions, their time in office marked by the toll of public life. But Trump, he seems untouched by the passage of time. It's strange, almost surreal. It's like he hasn't aged a day. I've watched every president I can remember go through visible changes as they've served, but Trump, he's remained the same. It's as though time doesn't affect him, like he's outside the realm of aging. It's uncanny, almost otherworldly, and it's unsettling to watch. As much as we're told to believe in his strength and resilience, there's something deeply off-putting about someone who doesn't show the natural signs of aging, someone who seems immune to the very forces that affect everyone else. It's a reminder that maybe the illusion of invincibility isn't real, and that no one is exempt from the inevitable. But here's the hard truth. We can't ignore the fact that Trump in many ways is starting to lose it. And let's be real, when you get to a certain age, things begin to slip. It happens to everyone, but with Trump, it's different. He's nearing 80, and it's becoming more and more evident that age is starting to take its toll on him. The very man who once exuded power and confidence is now showing signs of wear. And as much as we want to believe in his invincibility, the truth is becoming undeniable. He's faltering. His capacity to lead, to make sound decisions, is diminishing. And that's not something any of us should ignore. It's a stark reminder that no one is immune to the passage of time, and the cost of power is high. Now let's talk about something even more disturbing, something that speaks to the core of his presidency: the way his administration has treated immigrants. The images are etched in our minds: families being torn apart, children looking on in horror as their parents are arrested and thrown into detention. These aren't just numbers or statistics. These are real people with lives, hopes, and dreams, all caught in a system that seems determined to tear them apart. This is not just a political issue. It's a human rights crisis. It's an issue of morality, and it should stir something deep inside us all. It should resonate with every single person, regardless of political affiliation. How can you look at these families, these individuals, and not feel a sense of outrage? How can you see innocent people, people who have been living here for decades, contributing to society, suddenly swept away by a system that shows no mercy, and not feel that something is deeply wrong? We cannot simply look away from this. We cannot allow this kind of treatment to continue without questioning it, without standing up and saying, "This is not who we are as a country." These are human beings. These are fathers, mothers, children. They are not criminals. They are not enemies of the state. They are people who have sought safety and opportunity, just as so many of our ancestors did when they came to this country. Yet we continue to treat them as if they don't belong, as if their lives don't matter. The thought of seeing innocent people who have built lives here and been part of our communities being ripped away from everything they know, it's heartbreaking. It's impossible to reconcile with the values we claim to uphold. It's something we can't ignore. We need to do better. We need to fight for a system that doesn't tear families apart. We need to demand fairness and justice for all people, regardless of their background or where they come from. Because this is not the America we should be living in. We have the power to change this, and we must. Because if we don't, we risk losing everything that makes us great. This next election is going to be one of the most important in our history, and it's more crucial than ever that we remember why we're fighting. We're not just fighting over policies or politicians. We're fighting for a vision of this country that honors human dignity and doesn't tear families apart in the name of enforcement. We want a country that values human rights, not one that treats people like expendable pawns in political games. That's something I believe deeply, and I know many of you feel that too. I genuinely wish you the strength and resilience you'll need in this fight, because it's not over and it's bigger than any one of us. Looking back, though, it's hard not to feel that we didn't really have many good options to choose from in the first place. What were our choices? It's jarring, almost painful, to realize that the hope we placed in certain promises didn't materialize the way we envisioned. We were told that things would be better, that certain policies would be delivered, that this leadership would bring change. But the truth is, very few of those promises ever came to life. The vision we held for America didn't materialize the way we expected, and that's a hard reality to accept. When you look at the faces of people who were once staunch Trump supporters, you can almost see the guilt and remorse. These are individuals who put their faith in promises that haven't come to fruition, and now they're confronting the consequences of that choice. They deserve scrutiny, absolutely, for misreading the moment and backing policies that have fallen short or been harmful. But there's also something to be learned from their change of heart. The issues they're now speaking out about, ones that cut across traditional party lines, those are the issues that demand our continued attention as we head into the midterm elections. Two major issues that are standing out right now are ICE's conduct and the ongoing questions around the handling of the Epstein files. Let's start with ICE, because recent events in Minnesota have made the debate around immigration enforcement very real and very visible. In Minneapolis over the past few weeks, there have been multiple violent confrontations involving federal immigration agents. In early January, a 37-year-old American woman named Renee Good was fatally shot by an ICE agent during enforcement operations, an incident that triggered protests and nationwide outrage. Officials claimed the shooting was justified, but eyewitnesses and video evidence raised serious questions about that narrative. Then a few weeks later, during what federal officials described as part of a large enforcement operation dubbed Operation Metro Surge, federal agents again shot and killed a U.S. citizen, 37-year-old ICU nurse Alex Preddy, in Minneapolis. These shootings, part of a series of aggressive encounters involving federal immigration forces, have sparked protests, drawn condemnation from local leaders such as Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, and intensified the national conversation about how immigration enforcement should be conducted. The outrage isn't limited to grassroots activists and local officials. CEOs of major tech companies and leaders from many sectors have publicly criticized the federal immigration crackdown and called for de-escalation and a reevaluation of these tactics. Many civil rights organizations, including the ACLU, have demanded an immediate end to federal agents' aggressive operations in Minnesota, calling the recent killings evidence that the agencies involved are out of control and endangering communities. This isn't just another political talking point. It's a stark example of how federal enforcement actions can have deadly consequences for community members and raise serious questions about oversight, accountability, and the role of federal agencies in domestic law enforcement. These are issues that cut across political affiliations and concern fundamental questions about justice, safety, and respect for human life. At the same time, the bigger promise of transparency around situations like the Epstein files, another issue that was meant to be central to certain political platforms, has also fallen flat. Promises were made about releasing documents and uncovering truths, but what we've seen instead are heavily redacted pages and delayed disclosures that amount to little more than symbolic gestures rather than meaningful transparency. As we move toward the midterm elections, these are the conversations we need to keep having, not just among ourselves, but with neighbors, friends, and undecided voters who are also grappling with what all of S means for the future of this country. These are the real issues that cut through sound bites and headlines and reflect the lived experiences of everyday people. And if we want to shape a path forward that genuinely reflects our values, we need to stay engaged, informed, and vocal. Please share your thoughts, talk with your community, be part of the conversation not just as citizens, but as people who care deeply about justice, dignity, and accountability. We were promised transparency on the issues that matter most to the American public. Transparency on the Epstein files, transparency about the inner workings of our government, transparency on matters that could change the course of history. But instead, what we're seeing is something that could only be described as a cover-up. The promises of openness and honesty have been replaced with obstruction, secrecy, and the same familiar tactics of redaction and delay. And don't even get me started on the initial release. A picture of Winnie the Pooh where there should have been real content. A cartoon image meant to symbolize a supposedly serious matter. That's how seriously the people behind this issue are treating it. It's as though they've reduced a monumental issue to a joke, trivializing the very real questions that need to be answered. But the truth doesn't end there. The promises of new releases have been met with more delays and distractions. The conversation has been drowned out by a constant barrage of headlines, from political scandal to media circus. As if the media itself is purposefully steering us away from what truly matters. We're being distracted, manipulated, and kept in the dark. Let's talk about the latest update. A federal judge has blocked the push to force the release of more files related to Epstein. But that's where things get interesting. The judge didn't block the Democrats' push to get the files released. What he blocked was the appointment of a special master, a third-party overseer, someone who would ensure the process was fair and transparent. This request came not only from Democratic lawmakers, but also from Republican ones and victims of Epstein. It was a bipartisan effort to bring transparency and accountability to a situation that has remained shrouded in secrecy for far too long. While the judge didn't grant the request, he did acknowledge that the concerns raised are legitimate. He recognized that these issues need to be addressed. For the first time in this entire saga, a judge has confirmed that the fight for transparency is important and necessary. And while we didn't get the special master we were hoping for, that's a win in itself. But let's be clear, this isn't over. The fact that Joe Rogan, of all people, has publicly called out Trump on this issue speaks volumes. It may not be the perfect condemnation, and I'm sure some of you might think he could have gone further, but it's still progress. Rogan is a key voice in a culture that, for too long, remained silent or complicit when it came to these issues. And now, he's speaking up. This is the kind of shift we need to see more of if we're going to tackle the systemic problems facing this country. Moving on to another issue that continues to demand our attention, ICE and immigration enforcement. Nicole Wallace made an interesting observation about Joe Rogan's stance on ICE. On one hand, Rogan criticizes the agency and the tactics it uses. On the other hand, he defends them, rationalizing their actions as necessary. That's what's so frustrating about this back-and-forth approach. It's convenient, yes, but it's also contradictory. It's easy to call out the problems without fully committing to solving them. At least Rogan is acknowledging that something is wrong. But he's still walking a fine line, playing both sides of the debate. And then there's comedian Andrew Schultz, who, while still making his fair share of bro jokes, is slowly starting to slip in some criticism of Trump, ICE, and the entire MAGA agenda. He's starting to question things that he might have once defended without hesitation. And you know what? That's a step forward. Even if it's small, it's progress. Schultz is calling for accountability, and he's highlighting the real issues that ICE enforcement has caused. The agency has been caught wearing masks to impersonate real officers, engaging in crimes like robbery and sexual assault, and wreaking havoc on communities in the name of law enforcement. The crimes and misconduct have skyrocketed, and yet ICE continues to operate with little oversight. These are not isolated incidents. These are systemic issues that demand our collective attention. ICE has been allowed to operate with near impunity, and it's time for that to change. It's time for real oversight, real consequences, and real transparency about how our immigration system is being run. The fact that we're seeing comedians and podcast hosts, people who have historically been more passive on these issues, begin to question ICE's tactics, is a sign that the narrative is shifting. It's a sign that more people are waking up to the harsh realities of what's happening behind closed doors, and that's a step we can't afford to ignore. But we can't rest on the idea that just because some voices are starting to speak out, the work is done. Far from it. This is just the beginning. The fact that these issues are now in the spotlight means that they're being heard by more people. It means that the fight is expanding, but we need to keep pushing harder than ever. We need to keep raising these issues, demanding accountability, and making sure that the people in power understand that we're paying attention. We need to remind them that we won't settle for half measures, for the same old rhetoric, for cover-ups disguised as progress. We need to hold them accountable for the promises they've broken and the harm they've caused. And we need to make sure that when we head into the midterm elections, we bring with us a commitment to not just change, but real change. Now is not the time for complacency. Now is the time to speak louder, push harder, and demand more. The fight is far from over, and we have a responsibility to make sure it's a fight worth winning. And here's the harsh truth. A large number of young Americans are getting their news and forming their political opinions from podcasts. Whether it's Joe Rogan, Andrew Schultz, or others who have built massive followings, these individuals hold tremendous influence. They've created platforms where the most important issues are discussed, And in many cases, they're shaping the way young people view politics, culture, and the world around them. For some, these podcasts are their primary source of information. And while podcasts can be great spaces for discussion, it's crucial that we understand the impact they're having, especially when the narratives being pushed are shaping the very future of our nation. These platforms have power. They have the ability to influence how millions of people think and vote. And for many, this is their first exposure to political ideas that will inform how they engage with the world, how they vote, and the policies they believe in. But the reality is, if we don't continue to highlight the dangers of blindly supporting Trump and his policies, if we don't continue to raise awareness about the dangerous narratives that are being shaped in these spaces, we risk letting the far-right agenda continue to gain ground unchecked. We risk allowing people to become so entrenched in their beliefs that they stop questioning the very policies that are dividing the country and hurting vulnerable communities. The fight for truth and justice isn't over. The battle for a fair and just America continues, but the urgency of that fight is growing by the day. As we move closer to the midterm elections, it's critical that we don't let these issues fall by the wayside. The importance of our actions, our voices, and our votes has never been more clear. Every single person who is committed to fighting for the future of our country needs to stay vocal, stay engaged, and stay active. We cannot afford to sit back and let apathy or complacency take over. This is about more than just casting a vote. This is about standing up for the values we hold dear: equality, justice, and the idea that everyone deserves to have their voice heard. We need to push back against the misinformation and dangerous ideologies that have been allowed to permeate the media and culture for too long. We need to make sure that we are shaping the conversation, not letting others control it. Every vote counts. Each voice matters. And when we unite, when we come together to demand change, we can make a lasting impact. But only if we keep fighting. Only if we stay engaged, no matter how tough the battle may seem. As we approach the midterm elections, I'm calling on you, yes, you, to get involved. Now is the time to make sure we don't let this moment slip away. The future of our country is at stake, and it's up to all of us to ensure that it's a future we can be proud of. The consequences of inaction are too great, and we cannot afford to be passive when everything we believe in is under threat. So please like this video, comment below, and keep the conversation going. You don't need to have your own podcast to make a difference. You don't need to have millions of followers or a platform of your own to push for change. What you do need is a voice to speak up, to challenge the status quo, and to stand up for what is right. I'm sharing this message with you, and I'm asking you to share it with others. Share it with your friends, your family, your community. Don't just keep this to yourself. Engage in the discussions, raise awareness, and keep pushing for a better future. You see, every comment, every share, every conversation, it all adds up. Every small acti contributes to a larger movement. It's not about doing it all alone. It's about coming together, amplifying our voices, and making sure we're heard. Together, we can create a ripple effect. We can inspire others to act, to vote, and to engage in ways they never thought possible. So let's get loud. Let's stay vocal. Let's make sure we're on the right side of history. It's time for us to take back the narrative. It's time for us to demand accountability from those who have failed us. And as we head into the midterms, let's make sure we're shaping the future we want to live in, one where we can look back and say, we fought for what's right. We stood up when it mattered. Together, we can make a real difference. Together, we can make sure that our voices are heard, that our values are represented, and that we're building a future that we can all be proud of. So let's keep this fight going, because, in the end, this is our country, and we're the ones who can shape its future.